to our hour-long presentation about voter-owned elections. This is a solution to the problem of big money in politics. And for those of you who are new to our organization, Open Democracy is a 501c3 organization that works on a variety of different issues here in New Hampshire to advance a stronger democracy. So thank you for being with us, and we look forward to practicing democracy together in order to find solutions where we can fix the problems of money in politics. And I'm Olivia Zink, the Executive Director. And I just wanted to say that we acknowledge, Open Democracy acknowledges that we do our work on Indakina, a traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the lands and waterways and the people who have stewarded Indakina through generations and continue to do so today. So why is money in politics a problem? I'm going to put that one out to all of you. If you want to put something in the chat, why is money in politics a problem? But I know that many of you will feel that the big utility companies have influence over our government. The big pharmaceutical companies have influence because they make campaign contribution and lobby. And there are ways for us to fix many of the problems that money has in our system and equalize power so that citizens can have power and a voice in the process.
And one of those ways is to make every voter a donor. And so I'm going to share my screen and show a little video clip of what voter-owned elections would look like in practice. Let me know as this is playing if you can't hear the audio.
How small donor financing works. As an eligible voter, you would receive 4 Democracy Dollar certificates worth $25 each to give to the candidate or candidates of your choice at the beginning of each election cycle. Your Democracy Dollars help the candidates you like best run for office and limit the influence of powerful special interests. A similar program in Seattle is transforming local elections, boosting voter turnout, increasing the number of voters who contribute to candidates, limiting the influence of the wealthiest donors, and encouraging candidates from all walks of life to run for office. By allowing candidates in our city to run for office without having to depend on big, outside corporate sources of money, we can keep our elected officials accountable to us. Here's how small donor finance eligible voter.
So this video is an overview of the program in San Diego for their city, but this is what we're talking about here today for the whole state of New Hampshire, specifically for the Executive Council. And so what is the Executive Council? Feel free to pop in the chat if you know or have experience with the Executive Council, but in short, they are a check on the governor's power. And so they approve things like state contracts and nominations to state positions. And in 2022, the executive councilors spent over $1.4 million on their campaigns. And so having the system of voter dollars specifically for the executive council would be important in situations where so there's a big government contract coming before them. And we want to make sure that they're hearing the voices of voters and not just maybe the biggest donors that gave to their campaign. So voter dollars is a system that makes that possible. And next, actually, we have a video from an executive counselor sharing his experience of some campaign donations that he received.
I got sent a $500 check by a Fortune 100 accounting company. I didn't ask for it. I don't know anyone at the company. Now I know why they sent it to me. I was just asked to consider a $2 million no bid contract for, you guessed it, that same Fortune 100 company. Well, I say thanks, but no thanks. If you want me to run a people-oriented, people-funded campaign, you got to help me make up for this $500 check.
So there's an example in real time, or not in real time, but of a past executive counselor who had a contract and received campaign donations, maybe to sway his opinion. And this is where voter dollars come in and make the politics people-powered politics and not special interest politics. So how does it work? So it's a somewhat three-step process. So candidates this is a voluntary system, so candidates would have to opt in. And this is limited to executive counselors for now. And so first, candidates who opt into the system would have to qualify. So they have to receive $5 to $125 donations, showing that they have wide public small donor support. And then once candidates have qualified, every registered voter gets 4 $25 voter dollar certificates. And so they can give all of these certificates to one candidate or parse them out to a couple of candidates, anyone who's qualified for this system. And essentially that makes it so candidates have to go to the voters for their campaign cash and listen to the voters. And then last but not least, primary winners, executive council primary winners would receive a grant to fund the rest of their campaigns, $60,000 in a contested race and $10,000 in an uncontested race.
I feel Celia's hand.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah, I don't know when it's a good time to ask the questions, but we have a question in the chat by Liz, and I'm sorry if I mess up your last name, Tenterelli. She asked, how was that 1.4 million spread over the candidates in 2022? Did it influence the outcome?
Great question from Liz. And I will say that, you look at Executive Council District 1, Friends of Joe Kenny raised about $50,000, where Dana Hilliard raised about $163,000. So Joe Kenny raised about a third of what the Democratic opponent did. So the Republican raised about a third of what happened, but we know that that's a very gerrymandered district. In District 2, which is gerrymandered for the Democratic candidates, the Democratic candidates spent more than the Republican candidate, who basically spent money on gas. It was a very fun report to read. Although what's really interesting about that report is it came in April. All of their filed reports came in April of the year prior, so they were 6 months late filing reports. In Executive Council 2, they both spent a little over $100,000. In Executive Council 4, Kevin Kavanaugh spent about $228,000 to Ted Gatz's spending about $210,000. So even though the Republican candidate spent a little bit less, they were able to win. And in Executive Council District 5, the incumbent Dave Wheeler raised and spent about $116,000, whereas the Democratic opponent spent $174,000. And we know that the Republican candidate won in that district. So I hope that answers your question, Liz, with a lot of numbers, but I'm happy to send you all of those numbers if that's helpful. When we talk about how small donor financing funds our elections, it's really important why we want to say this is a good solution, that there are 40 cities, states, other county jurisdictions that have a system of public financing or small donor financing of elections. There's kind of three known systems. The democracy dollars or voter dollars that we're working with in New Hampshire. This system that we're proposing is both a hybrid system with the system like Seattle, but also has a grant system because we have a late primary. Maine and Connecticut have systems of grant-funded systems. Many of those systems, Maine passed public financing in 1996, and they have seen a lot of candidates opt in and choose to use the system. Connecticut passed their system through the legislative body, which is what we're doing in New Hampshire in 2005, and they have seen a lot of candidates that have run for office. I think the greatest story in Maine is a story of a waitress who decided to run using the public financing system to be a different voice in Augusta, Maine. And Connecticut, you've seen a lot of candidates that wouldn't have been able to serve in office without the system of public financing of elections that Connecticut has. So the city of Seattle was the first to have what their democracy vouchers is. So the system in Seattle has worked at the municipal level in many ways. It's so beautiful to see. Less than 1% of people in Seattle were donors to that election. And you saw making voters donors really transform politics in Seattle. They also had a case study a few years ago where big corporations tried to flood the elections, and it was really important to know that those systems really worked and held up. Thank you, Ophelia. I see Doug's question about the last chart showing the entire US.
These are existing places, I believe.
Yes, so those are existing states that are colored in that have some form of public financing, and then the cities are with the stars. So you see Hawaii's got a system as well. So there are about 14 states that have some systems. Some of the systems are not for all offices, they're just for some offices. Maine, Connecticut, Arizona have all state offices that they're funded. Although I will say that there was a few reforms that were passed in 2022 that are not yet, a couple of more jurisdictions in Maryland that are not yet on this map. So this is a really important reform, a solution to fix money in politics. And this solution is really transformative. It will rebalance the system. Our voter-owned election system, we have a bill introduced for 2024, and we're really excited. This is the first time that this bill has been sponsored by a Republican senator, so it will be bipartisan support. We need your help to help get this bill through the Senate. And so that's why we're doing these calls in advance of legislative session so that we can build grassroots support for these important reforms to provide alternatives to the currently privately financed campaigns that we currently have. Oh, these are some old polling numbers. And we just did a new poll, and we shared some of the polling results from the new poll. But I think it's really important to know that 80% of Granite Staters believe that special interests have more influence than the voters. And I think that's really what we want to turn upside down, because we really want voters to feel like they're empowered in these processes. And I think it's also really amazing to see, both in the old polling and the new polling, that people of all parties like these solutions. They really want a clean elections solution. And we've been working at this for a really long time. Jane Armstrong, the former president of the League of Women Voters, remembers the first bill that was introduced in 2000. I saw John Rao, RSVP, and I know he was part of those earlier campaigns. So this is not a new idea. This is an idea that we've tried for many, many years, and we're going to keep trying until we get reform. that we need. And we didn't put them. Okay, so we're going to break out into pairs. What we're going to do in the breakout sessions is answer the question, why are voter-owned elections important? And why is it important to get money out of politics? So you'll have a minute to share what your beliefs with your partner, and then your partner will share their beliefs, and then we'll come back from the breakouts.
We have a question in the chat, Olivia, before you go, if you wanted to answer that.
Hope you had a great conversation.
Yes. Yeah, we did. Oh, hi, Lorraine. Hi, Sue.
So I hope you had a good conversation with your pair about voter-owned elections. And what came out in those conversations? Kate, I'm going to pick on you because you're unmuted. What did you?
So we're actually thinking about, two of the books that we had done in the book club. So the Democracy Dollars or Democracy Vouchers one, and Become a Democracy, and the importance of letting everybody have a stake in being a donor. Like, let's say, I might be somebody that'll say, okay, I'll give $5 a month to some campaign until it's over. But I can also feel like I'm wasting my money because I'm giving $5 a month and somebody's giving 5,000. And then, as Sarah pointed out, there are loads of people who can't give the $5 a month. Like, they can't do that. So they can't participate even in that sort of small donor thing. But if everybody's got 4 $25 things, everybody can participate, and it's going to improve access of regular people to campaigns and candidates. That's one thing.
I love that. The participation, right? This empowers all of us to participate. I'm going to pick on somebody else in their breakout. Lois is unmuted. What did your breakout conversation look like?
Well, Sue and I talked mostly about, what a great vision it is.
Mhm.
And we want a very, very full and specific portfolio of answers to the skeptical, cynical, doubting, questioning, fearful, anxious public questions that are going to come at us when we start bringing this forward. We did a lot of exploring of that, how to convince people, because the Koch brothers will still be in there. We had questions too about, okay, I got my 100 voter-owned dollars, but I'm a gazillionaire and I can give anyway as much as I want, up to the max every time it's possible. What are going to be the parameters? And things like that. We need our answers to be at our fingertips and really good.
Well, that's important, right? Because we need those FAQs, and I think, but I think it's also important as far as the bill that has voter-owned elections does say that candidates have to take, if they take private donations, they're less than $125, I believe, for the executive council races. So they can't take big campaign cash from individual people. And then as far as the C4 organizations and the PACs and other things, there are built-in pieces of that, the bill, that sort of make sure that if they're opting into the voter-owned election system, they disavow those special interests money. We know that because of the court cases like Citizens United, we can't ban those super PAC activities, but because they're opting into our voluntary system, we're asking them to disavow that outside spending. And I think that might make a huge difference. We do see outside spending in our executive council races, but I think it will also be an interesting experiment to start with that as the pilot program. Rick Hubbard, it's awesome to see you. How was your conversations about voter-owned elections in your breakout room? What questions emerged?
I came in late because I've been ducking in and out. My walking, I don't know if you all know, I'm out walking 10 miles a day, 5 days a week across the country. But if I start at 8, 9 in the morning, I don't get done till about 4:30 or 5. And that is 6:30 or 7 your time. So that's why I was unhooking the tow car and hooking it up and all that kind of stuff. And I have another Zoom coming up at 6 o'clock that I'm in charge of with activists in Colorado. So I'm going to have to duck out.
Well,
But
thank
I
you
did
for
wanna
making
make-
the time.
I did want to make a couple of points that go a little beyond where New Hampshire is with this proposal. If you take the total money in the last presidential election for presidents, senators, reps, the whole ball of wax, divide it by the number of registered voters, which is about 168 million, you come out with $75 a person. Now, if you give that in some form, prepaid credit card voucher to all registered voters to spend in small amounts, you totally change the incentive that candidates have as to who they have to please in order to get into the debates. If you pair those small contributions and you control, not the way the Democratic and Republican parties control the debate process for president, but citizens control it, you can change the criteria so that it has nothing to do with who has the most recognition in the polls because they're a movie star, or who has the most money because they loaned their campaign most of the money that they have. They don't have support. Make the criteria having large numbers of small donations at a lower level to get to the first level. So those who can hear you, if it resonates, then you're the candidate that gets to participate in the debate to a broader audience so they can decide if they like you or not. That would totally reorient the incentives in our system. And I just pass it out because it goes, a little bit further afield than what we're doing now. But what you're doing now is groundbreaking because we're not doing much of it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Rick. And thanks for walking across the country.
You're welcome. But it's not about me, it's about the issues.
Yeah. Any other questions that came up? Yes, Betsy.
So for us, it was about the graphic you showed that indicated that New Hampshire is the only New England state that does not have voter-owned elections. That was a surprise. Is that correct?
Yep. So in Maine, they call it clean elections, and Massachusetts, they call it something different than voter-owned elections. But yeah, we're the only state that doesn't have any form of public financing for higher offices.
And there was another question. I promised Corinne I would remember, and now I've forgotten because we were talking about other stuff. Do you remember, Corinne? Maybe it'll come to me later. Sorry about that. I'll put it in the chat when I think of it.
Okay. I saw that Betsy, you asked a question that I think I might have answered, but if a candidate has,
you did, yeah.
I know it.
I know what it was.
I know what it was, and I was yes, you remembered. Okay, good.
Yeah, so I just remembered. So it has to do with the pros and cons of voter-owned elections being passed in the legislature versus in like through popular vote in a referendum.
Right. So New Hampshire does not have a referendum. So legislation has to be passed by our legislative body. We do not have the ability like Maine does to get signatures and get something on the ballot to pass. So Maine did pass their clean elections in 1996 through a ballot initiative. But because we don't have that tool in our democracy here in New Hampshire, we have to convince the legislature to approve to approve this policy change. Connecticut is another state that passed it through legislative bits. The Connecticut had a little bit of a scandal though, so they were able to pass reform post a scandal, so.
Olivia, is it somewhere, I don't know where I heard it or if I heard it in Seattle, but is there a feeling that if it's passed by legislation, that it's more likely to remain stable and not be taken undone than if it was done by consensus of a vote of the people?
Well, I don't know if that's true across the country, but because we don't have the tool of a
Right,
referendum, we don't have that option. Like that path is not open for us. But I think as long as we pass the system in a robust way, in a bipartisan way, and we show that it works, we will continue to have traction. And I think that's what's happened in other states where they have robust, strong systems. Hawaii doesn't have a robust, strong system and has seen attacks on their public financing system. So it is a reform that we're going to have to keep advocating for, to work to expand it and to work to fund it. Kate.
Yeah, so I get, and I like the idea for this time around, just making it that 5-person race, the executive council race. I think that's a good way to do it, sort of a lab. So I have a question for you guys, tactically speaking, about, so it's a Senate bill. You found, I gather, a Republican sponsor. Was that a tactical decision? Because as you say, the House bill didn't succeed last year. Like, what's kind of the strategy for us moving this bill forward here in this state?
Thanks for this. So we need 13 votes to get this thing out of the Senate. So we're going to need to work on the Republicans on the election law committee first, to try to get one of them. Bob and I met with the chair of election law committee, so we know it's not going to be him. So we're going to try for the other two. And then we're going to need to get a couple of more senators, Republican senators, to help advance this bill in the Senate. Last year, as Kate mentioned, we did try this as a House bill. We lost by 20 votes in the House. We have those 20 House members to talk to, and we have our targets to talk to. So if we make it over the threshold into the House, then we have our work cut out for us to sort of have those 20 or so conversations to advance it. But the first step is to find a few more Senate votes to pass this bill. And we wanted to do another breakout group. So we're going to do one more breakout group. We're going to divide the room in half. And have a couple of smaller discussions, but I see there's lots of questions and we'll get back to them. But Janet, do you want to ask one question before we go into breakout rooms?
Well, actually, Kevin Fleming and I were put in a breakout room, and Kevin noted his experience with some Republican friends who don't support the idea of voter-owned elections. And Kevin agreed that he would explain to us what he dealt with, the comments that he received, and they struck me as having some weight. So, Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Janet. The couple of times I've had conversations with Republicans or heard some of them speak, the notion of whether or not people that would not gather any support would somehow be eligible to be out be eligible for public funding. So should there be some kind of a threshold amount of money, modest, but it would then, let's say $1,000 for a state rep or something. But if you can't find, 10 people to give you $100 or whatever it is, or, 20 people to give you, then you don't become eligible for matching. And I just thought that was an interesting idea. I didn't quite know. I never had engaged in any great length of time. But then the other side of it is, okay, thank you. Thank you.
So first of all, every public funding has some robust threshold of qualifications. So in New Hampshire, you have to get a small amount, $5 to $25 contributions from a number of individuals in order to qualify. So you do have to hit that threshold. And I've talked to a friend in Maine. You have to do 5 individual contributions, and you have to kind of hustle in order to find that many people to give you $5 contributions. So not anybody can qualify. You have to have some level of popularity in order to meet that threshold to qualify. And it will require you to do some work in order to get the minimum number of small donor contributions in order to sort of have some popularity and threshold to qualify. And all systems
That helps. Thank you.
have some qualifications.
Thank
So
you.
that's built into the system.
Thank you.
Olivia, could I add one thing, since I probably will have to go fairly soon?
Sure.
It's in response to some of those objections from Republicans and Democrats. It's a different way and different argument. If you look at the Constitution, and let me start with our federal Constitution, but I did just check New Hampshire's, and it makes one of the same points in the preamble, that we are setting up our system and electing representatives to serve our common good with our consent. And federally, the preamble that all our representatives take an oath to in the Constitution is to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility. We're not doing very well on that one. Provide for the common defense, and most importantly, promote the general welfare. Now, that gets into things like the systems we are using that affect all of us. If we're going to use as our economy capitalism, the capitalism is very efficient at making money for somebody. It's not capitalism's job to make it work broadly. But if we elect representatives and they adopt capitalism, it is their responsibility to balance the pros and cons of capitalism so it works broadly for the majority of all of us. Similarly with healthcare, what system will provide good quality healthcare to all Americans at the least total system-wide cost in a way that is sustainable. You can make the same argument for this matter with response to setting up our political system. Their goal, their responsibility is to set it up to be fair, inclusive, competitive for all of us. And clearly the systems as they're set up state after state are horribly unfair for all independents. And they're almost a third of all independents in America. So when they stand up and object, ask them to explain why they're not doing their job. Put them on the defensive. It's powerful. And so I just wanted to add that one point because it's useful. You can, when they object, you can ask them in a polite way to explain why they're not doing their job. And that will get you some attention. If people think that makes sense.
Doreen, do you want to take us to breakout rooms? The next conversation we want to do is have you practice a conversation with the legislature.
Never mind.
We were mid role play, but Martha was gonna convince a cynical senator. Okay, so thank you for practicing having tough conversations with legislators. Thank you for those of you who role played tough senators, and thank you for those of you, Senator King, who was a very easy sell as a supporter of the policy. Anything that came out in your breakout rooms of ideas? Yeah, Kate, go ahead.
The thing that Lois did right at the end was like the perfect way to do it. So to just ask the legislator, and Lois, why don't you say it? But it's like, would you be open to using democracy, public financing for your campaign? If not, like, why not? Lois, feel free to fix that, what I just said, but I thought just making a first
Perfect. That's
conversation
perfect.
right there, great way to start.
Yeah, we had a great way to start by Shadeko started with "I am your constituent," which I thought was an awesome way to start. And then when she got the senator to support the voter-owned elections, she asked the question, will you be willing to talk to other senators? And I thought that was awesome too.
Good points.
Anything else that came out in that breakout room? Was it scary to talk to your pretend senator?
My senator was very hostile.
Good thing I know you have practice talking to a real hostile senator.
In terms of getting this legislation passed, I think it's important that we demonstrate to taxpayers that the cost to run such a program, especially where it's now been reduced to executive council races, is really a rounding error in terms of people's overall budgets. Well worth whatever the cost is going to be. Some people may spend more than $10 or $12 on losing lottery tickets. So I'll end there.
I agree with you, Bob. I think the price we pay for privately financed elections is a very good argument. And the price we pay for higher electric bills or higher prescription drugs, I think is a really important point, that we're already paying for a corrupt, broken system, and that making these changes to a publicly financed system would give our voice back to the policies that we care about. So we promised you we would do this for an hour, and I feel like we just scratched the surface on so much things we wanted to talk to, but Sarah wanted to just cover a couple of things: our toolkit, our talking points, and an upcoming action.
And as I said in my breakout group, probably Wednesday or Thursday, I'll send around the toolkit that I just put in the chat in an email, as well as the recording of this if you ever want to look back. But from here on out, next steps are to take some action on this. So you just practice talking with a mock legislator. Hopefully that sort of broke the ice for you, so you feel like when this bill comes around, you can call your senator and say, "Hey, I heard about this. It's coming up for a vote. Please consider it, and I hope you will pass it." So please talk about this policy with your friends and neighbors. And also, one extra step would be to write a postcard to your senator. So I'll have info in the follow-up email about how to find which senator you have if you don't know, how to find their address. And then last but not least, one action could be join a regional democracy team. So Open Democracy has 6 teams across the state that work region by region to strengthen democracy, and they come together and work on civic action each week. So I'll put my email in the chat, and you'll get an email from me at some point this week. So reply to that if you would like to join us in this work. And last but not least, we have an upcoming event on November 11th. We have a high school voter registration conference. So if you are an educator, past or present, or you know of any educators, or you know of any high school students in New Hampshire, please let them know about this. We're trying to take this project and have students own their own voter registration drive at every high school in New Hampshire. So would love to have you be part of that amazing opportunity. And I'll put my email in the chat.
And I see there's a couple of other questions, so we'll hang out for additional questions that you might have about voter-owned elections. But if you have to run off, we totally understand. We don't want to keep you, Lois.
I just want to put a little pitch in for this because I saw it years and years ago and it stunned me. The executive counselor seats are where people stop voting in the booth because they don't know who the people are. They often just skip right over that. The undervotes for executive council are stunning, and yet these people have enormous power over our lives in so many aspects. So I hope by bringing this forward freestanding as the first position to do voter, we can also do some serious educating about the importance of every voter having a say in who gets elected and voting for them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And
That's it.
you're absolutely right. We're going to have to explain what executive counselors do because some voters may not know. So it's important. Yeah. I see questions coming into the chat too. Or comments. Any other questions, Shideko?
Yeah, I was wondering, is it too bold to ask a candidate for executive council? I was thinking of Karen Leo Hill and asking her what if she knows about voter-owned elections, and would that be
That's
too
perfectly
odd?
acceptable. And I think she does know about public financing of elections. So it would be good to talk to her, but also to know from her, like how much time she's spending raising money for that race, because I think it takes a lot of time to raise the $100,000 or so that executive counselors have to raise in order to run
Okay.
competitive race.
Okay, thank you.
And we still need to talk to your senator too. I know we need to reschedule that meeting. Any other questions? Melissa's unmuted. Melissa, did you learn something tonight about this?
Yes, this is really my first dive into this, and so it was a little confusing to me at first. I understand the work that you're doing and the importance of it. So I enjoyed learning and have more to do. And Sarah Lobdell was just fantastic in the session, and Ophelia helping fill in the blanks for me.
Yeah.
I'm not done. I'm just starting. Thank you.
It's important that we, are a team together to learn together and practice together. So, so important.
I wanted to say to Melissa, I did get a copy of the bill and read it. It's very long, and I had to go through it more than once. But the questions that you were asking, they're in there in black and white, and it's easy. It's easier to understand it once you see it that way. I really took a long time to read it more than once and think about, but it was helpful to me, and you might find it so also.
Okay, well, good. Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have a link to the language in the bill?
Yeah.
I have the bill language that Senator Innes filed, so I'm happy to forward that around. Bob, I think it might already be in your inbox because I sent it to the legislative committee, but I'm happy to share that language with anyone that's interested in it. It's very similar to House Bill 304 from last year, so except for that included the governor's race. So basically, it's just scaled back from that language. But I'm happy to send around a draft if anyone wants a copy of the language. But I honestly, I'm glad Corrine thinks reading legislation is easy. There's the talking points and some of the other literature we have might be easier for understanding because the legalese of the bill is a little bit, I find a little bit harder to
I didn't say it was easy. What I said was you can see it in exact, once you get it,
Yeah.
the talking points are absolutely more helpful. But I think I understood what you were saying, Melissa, that in order to see it, you see it and you see like each one of those exact ways to fill up the pot. It lists them there, and but it's not easier, no, at all. But it was helpful.
And it's 14 pages, so just FYI, the bill is not a small bill.
I got it in 9, Olivia. Am I missing something?
Oh no, maybe you just have not double spaced.
Oh, all right, okay. Yeah, mine is single space. Yeah. I was going to say I'm missing something.
Lorraine, I see you
Yeah,
trying.
I just wanted to ask if you would please send me a copy of the bill. That
Sure.
would be most helpful.
Yes, me too.
Thank you.
Lorraine and Melissa, okay.
And me as well,
I was
Olivia.
gonna
So it'll be at the
say-
top of my pile.
I'd
Well,
appreciate
Sarah's
Bill.
gonna do a follow-up email to everyone. Sarah, do you want to just add
Yeah.
that to your follow-up email?
Yeah, I was gonna say if you just want to forward it to me, and then I'll just send it to everybody.
Great.
That'd be
Perfect.
sweet.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming tonight, and we'll talk to you all very shortly, I'm sure. We'll either see you at another event or or join one of our book clubs. Sarah, Kate's looking for suggestions for next year's book club. So if you would like to suggest a book to read, or if you want to do more learning about voter-owned elections, we can hold another Zoom. So let us know what you're interested in doing, and we'll keep doing some conversations.
Thanks for putting this on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Both
Thank
of you,
you.
Sarah and Olivia.
I hope you enjoyed practicing.